All right. Happy Monday, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm excited to talk about this topic today because it is rampant how many people are dealing with candida overgrowth, with yeast, with either yeast infections as women or belly bloat, brain fog. And we're going to get into all the signs and symptoms and what this means and how to get rid of it. So, to begin, my name is Carrie. If you don't know me, I am a regenerative detoxification specialist and a holistic nutritionist. I'm just trying to make sure we don't get feedback here. I'm closing this window. It is my in life to teach people that suffering is optional. So when we get into my whole screen just froze, guys. Hold on. When we get into an imbalanced state in our body, that is when we have troubles. Oops. Okay, we've got all sorts of things happening. My back was frozen for a while. Okay, when we get into an imbalanced state in our body, that is actually when we start to get symptoms. And so symptoms mean that there's been an underlying issue for a long time. And so the one thing that I want to really focus on is that oftentimes we think that an onset of an issue, like right when we got the symptom, is when something shifted. And that oftentimes is not the case. So when we're dealing with bacteria, when we're dealing with viruses or anything in the body, the onset can happen early on, and it can be manifesting and building and replicating itself in tissues, and then the symptoms come. So it's not always direct cause and effect. So I want to go through and clear up all questions around that. And I'm going to pull up my screen for you guys. So what is candida? So if you aren't familiar with what candida is, it's a fungus. It's a form of yeast, and it lives in your mouth, in your intestines in small amounts. It lives on our skin in small amounts, and it actually does aid with digestion and nutrient absorption. So it's part of your body's normal microflora. So I want everyone to understand, like, we all have different bacterias. Our body is actually trillions of cells and two fluids. We have blood and we have lymph, and the blood feeds all of our glands and our organs, and the lymph cleans all of our glands and our organs. And then we have the microbiome and the gut bacteria. And in addition to having those two fluids, we have over 100 trillion cells, but we have 10 times more bacteria than cells. So this is extremely important to understand. So if we are more bacteria than we are human cells, we obviously know that this is one of the most important systems in our body, and it serves a large purpose to help keep the ecosystem in balance. So I like to think of our body as that, as an ecosystem. So if you think of a rainforest, and an internal environment has to stay in harmony and balance. If one species starts to overtake, then we have all sorts of havoc happening in the rainforest. And the same thing happens inside the human body. So the goal is not to have zero candida, because we actually need it. The goal is to figure out why it's overgrowing and what it's doing to your body. And so right now, I share that statistic that over 138 million women worldwide deal with yeast infections or candida overgrowth infections. And that's just vaginal yeast infections. So if that's happening there, over 80% of all Americans have reported gut disturbance, whether it's SIBO, belly bloat, allergies, inflammation, acid reflux. All of these are actually signs of candida overgrowth, and they are misdiagnosed and misunderstood over and over and over again. So getting your body into balance is essential. But candida does aid in nutrient absorption, and it's part of our normal microflora. And so it lives in this like delicate balance, and we'll have it in our mouth, we'll have it in our throat, we have it in our gut, and it is in the vagina of women. So when we have an overgrowth, what does that mean? So ideally our good and bad bacteria stay in balance, right? And I don't really like to say like good bacteria, bad bacteria, because technically all the bacteria serve a certain role. But when we overfeed certain bacteria and they start multiplying, that's when we get into trouble. So other forms of yeast and viruses and mites actually make up our microbiome, and that's how we exist in a balanced state. And then when we live in this balanced state, we will feel clear in our mind. We will have really good digestion. Our energy will be great. Our elimination pathways are open. We're pooping 2 to 3 times a day. These are like really important things. When you start to see, one of the really common things that I hear a lot is brain fog. People have terrible, terrible brain fog. And they don't know why. Like, why am I so tired? I have such bad brain fog, or they call it mom brain. And although children are exhausting, it's not it. Your brain should still work. And so then we start to see that candida has overgrown in the body. I'm going to show you a picture here. My screen is just going wild. So, and show you what it looks like when yeast overgrows. So this is a little picture of like what candida overgrowth is. So like I said, we all have this yeast topically, throat, mouth, in the gut flora. Now we have a 2-inch mucous membrane at the bottom of our gut lining. And so this 2-inch mucous membrane is actually called ALA, alpha lipoic acid. And it's extremely important to our overall health. And the role of that mucosa, that mucous membrane, is actually to keep the gut bacteria in balance. It removes bad bacteria. It actually helps with the elimination. It'll send it over to the liver, gallbladder to be processed out of the body. And it also pulls out heavy metals. And so when we're coming in contact with metals, you know, parasites and stuff are in our water, they're everywhere. So if you're like, oh, you know, I don't know if I have parasites or candida, I would say 100% of people have it. 100% have it in some way. And this is where most of our dis-ease comes from. So next week, we'll be talking more on parasites and viruses. So I'll stay the topic this week. But the first thing I do when I work with a patient is right away, we have to get the microbial environment under control. You defungal, deworm, always, because from there, they actually affect all of your immune cells. So when we have this first adherent, so this is like yeast. And then what happens when we get this mucous membrane starts to deteriorate. So the 2-inch mucous membrane gets out. When it starts to deteriorate, it happens from many things. It happens from antibiotics. It happens from chemical pesticides. It happens from too much acidic food and refined sugars. This starts to deteriorate at this mucous membrane. And what happens is also some of those foods that I mentioned start to actually feed the yeast. They feed the candida. And then we start to, instead of, usually the gut bacteria would be able to keep this in balance. But if you have this damage in your gut lining, you have a leaking gut, these can actually adhere. And they start adhering right to the stomach lining. And so that's like the initiation phase. And then they can adhere right into the biofilm. So you've heard of like stripping your biofilms and cleaning. Maybe you haven't heard of that. That's, I should assume that. But you have these cells and biofilms where it starts to adhere and like really get into the tissues. So this is like what we would call leaky gut, essentially. And then the dispersal of it can permeate right past your gut, into your lymphatic system, into other tissues, into other cells. And now we have candida overgrowth in the whole body, not just the belly. And this is when we have lots of joint pain, rheumatoid arthritis. Rheumatoid arthritis is a heavy fungal dis-ease. And so we really have to get the candida bacteria back in control and repair the gut lining and the mucous membrane of the gut. So yeah, this just talks about, I did a lot of notes for you guys. Your gut is naturally lined with mucous membranes that protects it, but candida damages your cell gut wall. And it also, when the damage is already there on the gut cell wall, it has an opportunity for bacteria biofilms, which are groups of organisms that are protected by a slime, literally, like they have a slime around them. And then they can attach to your cell wall, which makes it hard to control. And so candida, I talked about this, I think maybe last week, but candida is really, really smart. And it can actually morph and change form to survive in its environment. So it will actually originally be like round, a normal candida bacteria or yeast. And when the environment starts to get maybe too acidic or too alkaline, it'll actually become like rod-like shaped and spread out and morph shape. So it responds to shifts in temperature or acidity by going from a rounded yeast cell to an elongated hypha cell. hyphal cell. And these elongated cells have the ability to just permeate the gut lining. And here we have leaky gut syndrome. And so leaky gut is most often caused by chemical pesticides and bacterial overgrowth. And then in addition to lifestyle choices. So once in the bloodstream, I already talked about that, candida can actually invade other tissues, and it can quickly transform from a gut problem to a full body problem. I already talked about that. Here's 6 causes of candida overgrowth. So high carbohydrate diets. I'm not talking fruits, I'm talking processed breads, pastas, sugars. And when you have an overgrowth of bacteria, of candida, you will crave their food. You will crave more pasta, more fat, more salt, more sugar. All of the things that are like really greasy, fatty, and feed this environment will be your cravings. So high carb diets, alcohol consumption, against popular belief, fermented foods actually feed candida infections. I am not a fan of fermented foods. I don't believe in drinking kombuchas and kefirs. They actually are filled with sugar, and they are in a pre-fungal state because they're in a fermented state, and they actually feed active candida infections. So the more kombucha you're drinking, the worse your stuff is going to get. Medications. I mean, birth controls is a big cause, antibiotics, pharmaceuticals. And then we talk about chronic stress. It impairs your immune system and shuts down your digestive system. When you're under stress, like you could be eating perfect. And I can attest to this. When my body has been under an insane amount of stress, I eat healthier than anyone I know. And I've seen things come up in my body and happen. And I was like, oh, that's a stress sign. Like when my digestion will shut down all of a sudden out of nowhere. I go from pooping 3 times a day to not pooping, and my diet didn't change. And then I have to look at my lifestyle. So look at your stress. And then autoimmune diseases are treated with immunosuppressants. So if you're on immunosuppressant drugs, this is going to stop your body's ability to actually fight infections, which is an essential piece. So it's 10 common overgrowth symptoms of candida is skin and nail and fungal infections like athlete's foot, ringworm, toe fungus, having toenail fungus. This is a sign of the underlying pathogenic fungi. So candida is in its healthy state is just like little yeast cells that help with nutrient absorption. When it becomes pathogenic, it has changed form. It has gotten into the hyphal cells. It has spread into the leaky gut and throughout the body, and it's become like more that like rod-like shape. And this is a pathogenic fungi. And this is what causes dis-ease in the body. So like you might be like, oh, I have yellow toenails. That's actually a big deal. It actually means that the fungus is systemic from head to toe. Feeling tired or worn down or suffering from chronic fatigue or fibromyalgia. Gut infections such as candida overgrowth can completely suppress your immune system and interfere with your energy. There's a lot of nutrient deficiencies associated with candida. Vitamin B6, essential fatty acids, and magnesium are some of the highest ones. And it's literally because your gut makes your B vitamins, and we're also not getting our nutrients because that candida now has morphed and changed form, and the yeast cells are not helping with nutrient uptake anymore. They're actually feeding themselves and multiplying. The digestive issues will present as bloating and constipation or diarrhea. Much like when bread rises, that's like the belly bloat. I mean, like look at what you're eating, what you're putting in is going to feed that yeast. So this is really a very passionate place of mine to share. It's hard, but autoimmune diseases like Hashimoto, I had Hashimoto, thyroiditis, I had that. I didn't have rheumatoid arthritis, but I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, which is chronic pain. So Hashimoto, thyroiditis, rheumatoid arthritis, ulcerative colitis, lupus. I was diagnosed with early onset lupus, psoriasis, scleroderma, or multiple sclerosis are huge signs of candida overgrowth. I mean, there's really no other reason for it other than when the pathogenic bacteria has taken over the immune system. And we don't see autoimmunity. We don't see these sort of symptoms come up until the immune system has actually collapsed. And that is a big deal. And so when we see things in the blood, or we might go to the doctor and get our blood tested all the time, and it might test fine. Or you get a stool test and it might test fine. Like, oh, there's no parasites, no this or that in there. And it's literally because it's interstitial, it's intertissue. It's not coming out necessarily. It hasn't morphed into the blood yet, but it's in your tissues. And so Wilhelm Reich always said the issues are in your tissues. And this is something to remember, that we have to detox these out of our tissues, but it's a very, there's a very orchestrated way to do it, because these bacteria actually contain toxins and cytokines. And so when we start to release these in the body, we can feel really sick if we're releasing them too fast. So it's important that you know what you're doing and that you're working with somebody, and that we have solutions for you to help you with that. But basically, candida overgrowth damages your gut lining, which allows for the microbes, the proteins, and the undigested food particles to escape into your bloodstream. Your immune system will actually mark these as foreign invaders, as pathogens, and begin to attack them. So as the invaders continue escaping, because you've got leaky gut now, your immune system goes into overdrive, and it sends more and more antibodies to battle all of these invaders, including inflammation. So when you have systemic and chronic inflammation, again, that root cause is we need to repair the gut. We need to get the bacteria back into balance, and then it will start to die off. Difficulty concentrating, poor memory, lack of focus, ADD, ADHD, irritability, mood swings, anxiety, depression, or brain fog are the symptoms of this. This is probably pretty much every person I have that comes into the clinic is dealing with one or many of these symptoms. They suppress our body's ability to create or secrete serotonin. And that is because 80% of our hormones are made in our gut. So serotonin, melatonin, all of your happy dopamine, healthy hormones are made in the gut. So when our gut biome is down and we have leaking membrane and we're not getting our nutrients and we have all these symptoms, you will absolutely have anxiety, depression, brain fog, fatigue, you name it. It's going to be there. And so what you will end up doing is going to your doctor for these symptoms and get put on a script or get put on something for antidepressant or an anti-anxiety med. And those are actually immunosuppressants. So the problem will continue to get worse and more systemic. Now, I am not saying jump off your meds or don't ever get on meds. I do believe there's a time and a place. I think that Western medicine has served a lot of people to get into a better state. And then if you're looking for more natural solutions, then, reach out to the person that brought you to this call, and they can help support you, get connected with us. And we would support you for your health goals. If you're desiring to titrate off, you would work with the doctor, your doctor, not mine. But skin issues like eczema, psoriasis, hives, and rashes. So once candida cells actually escape into your bloodstream, they colonize on your skin and they cause a lot of these issues. Now, in regenerative detox, like I opened the call talking about how your body is trillions of cells and two fluids. You have blood and you have lymph. Blood feeds, lymph cleans. All of what you eat, drink, breathe, or put on your skin goes into your lymphatic system, this fluid-based system that's 80% of your body's fluid. And then that lymphatic system has to bring the waste. So just like we eat and poop, your cells do the same. They take what they need, they discard the rest. And that has to be put into it goes into the lymphatic system, then it has to be brought to the kidneys. And the kidneys actually filter that waste out through the urine. So if your body is not properly filtering lymphatic waste out, you're going to have another reason for backup of sewage. And this backup, when we have excess proteins in the body, when we have excess starches floating around in the body, that the lymphatic system is not eliminating properly through the kidneys, and then because the gut barrier is damaged, you have a systemic head to toe overgrowth of waste. So it's just like, if we don't flush our toilet, we're going to have an issue. And so when we see skin stuff, eczema, psoriasis, psoriasis literally is a fungal infection that bursts through the skin. So this is coming from the inside out. It's an internal problem. So oftentimes doctors will give you topical steroid creams, antifungal creams to get rid of the topical infection, but the infection is coming from inside the body, and you have to heal the body from the inside out. Everything that you see on your body is a reflection of what's going on in your organs, in your tissues, in your cells, and in your lymphatic system, and of course your blood. So vaginal infections and urinary tract infections. There's a lot of people that get repeat UTIs, repeat vaginal infections. I shared on the slides for this class that over 158 million are expected to deal with severe fungal or yeast overgrowth by 2030 at the rates that we're rising. So why is this happening, right? Why are we continuing to increase the amount of yeast overgrowth that we have? And I will tell you, a lot of it is our environment. It's our food, it's our air, it's our soil. So our soil is incredibly depleted. The microbiome of the soil is very damaged. The United States has like the worst soil in the world. And we are spraying chemical pesticides at an insane level. We're spraying about 4.5 billion pounds a year across the globe. And these chemical pesticides act as an oral antibiotic. So if you're not eating 100% organic, you're getting it. And even if you eat 100% organic, you're getting it. So chemical pesticides, the active ingredient in Roundup is called glyphosate, and it's spun off and been recreated many times. So it's this herbicide is prominent. It's in 75% of our rainwater. It's coming through your tap water. You're cooking your food in it. You're washing your dishes in it. You're showering in it. We're breathing it, we're eating it, whether we like to admit it or not, because it is a water-soluble molecule that we cannot extract. And that's a big problem. And what it's done is it's killed the microbiome of the soil. And there's essential components in soil that support human health. So fulvic and humic acid is one of the main things that actually support human health, that come from soil, that come from your fruits and veggies, that we actually should be ingesting daily. And so we have to try to get back to that space, get back as close as we can. And I'll wrap up the call with that. And after I finish these last couple of points here. So what we're seeing when we have vaginal infections and UTIs and rectal itching and all of that stuff is a severe level of candida overgrowth. And the candida bacteria live, again, it's not just that, the urine coming out could be more acidic and have candida, but you have candida bacteria in the vagina as well. And when your immune system starts to go down and that candida starts to overgrow, this is what becomes a yeast infection. And so like 75% of all women will get at least one vaginal yeast infection in their lifetime, and half of those will have at least one reoccurrence. So although it's much less common, urinary tract infections are also a candida symptom. Severe seasonal allergies or itchy ears. So this is something that people are like, oh my gosh, my ears are itchy. That is candida. There's nothing else other than that. And that is because the candida has become systemic. It's leaked into your membranes. It's gone into the head. But your immune system is responding to something in the environment, such as pollen or cotton dander, or whatever it is. But the reason that your response to these environmental allergens is heightened is often that your immune system is in high alert because of candida overgrowth. So that goes along with regenerative detox. Also, if your lymph system is full, say you can't flush your toilet, your kidneys aren't filtering, everything's backed up, you've got an overgrowth of bacteria, parasites, etc. in the body, and one more irritant comes in, your immune system can't take it. It's like, nope, we have to start purging. And so you'll have the runny nose, the watery eyes, itchy ears, the sneezing, the coughing. And so it's a combination of the lymphatic system being way too full and way too backed up, and having a candida overgrowth, so your immune system is on high alert and is rejecting any sort of irritant. Strong sugar and refined carbohydrate cravings is really, really common. And that's because yeast feeds carbohydrates, yeast. Carbohydrates feed yeast, and you'll crave sugar. And I already mentioned that. I have lots and lots of other notes, but I'm looking at the time. So I'm going to stop there on my notes, and we can continue next week. We'll talk about parasites and viral loads and co-infections. So it's very similar to like Lyme and different viruses, and just understanding the nature of viruses and pathogenic infections. So I want you to understand that you can and will heal your body. And the things that happen in our environment, like, okay, so how do we combat the fact that we're ingesting oral antibiotics daily? Well, one, eat 100% organic. That's the best thing you can do in this moment. Two, work with something to help remove the glyphosate out of your body, because we have to repair the gut lining. We have to repair the gut biome. And then the other little thing that I wanted to mention is that when we're dealing with bacterial overgrowth and when we're dealing with fungus in particular, when we have all of our cells, like I mentioned, we're around 100 trillion cells, they all need to have what's called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. And so when we don't have a high level of ATP, that's the environment where antigens, pathogens, microbes, parasites can not only attach to our cells, but begin to multiply. And so they breed quickly, they multiply, they change form, just like I mentioned. And so you can go through a period of trying to kill off that pathogen load, the pathogenic fungi or the yeast. You can try to kill it off, but if your ATP is way down here, it's just going to keep remultiplying. So in regenerative detox, we work with regenerating the cell health. So getting the cellular ATP high, getting the chemical pesticides out of the gut, repairing the gut lining and repairing the microvilli, getting that balanced ecosystem again. So here, if you've been invited to this call, the person that has reached out to you has a way to get you connected with the information on how to resolve this issue in your body. So we work with something called Biomedic that's incredibly powerful. And it's scientifically proven and third-party tested to actually remove 75% of glyphosate in 6 weeks. And it also reduces C-reactive protein, which is your inflammatory protein, by 74% in 6 weeks. So when we start to clean the biofilms, and we start to strip the biofilms out of the body, clean the biofilms out of this overgrowth of candida and start remineralizing the gut and repairing that mucous membrane with fulvic and humic acid, which is in our Biomedic, you start to see all of the body come into balance again. And then we also work with cellular protocols and high nutrient dense organic superfoods that are grown in regenerative soils. So this is the first time you're ever hearing about soil, I love the analogy that Rita shared a while back. It's like 1 carrot from a regenerative soil. The amount of nutrition that's in 1 carrot from a regenerative soil takes around, I believe it's 200 carrots in a conventional soil. So it's a very significant difference. Everybody real quick. It's a very significant difference in micronutrients and what's going to be in there for healthy bacteria to feed your healthy flora. We actually have fiber eating bacteria in our gut, and then we have yeast as well. So when we are feeding that fiber eating bacteria, when we are like giving that our body are all of the things that it needs, so that fiber eating bacteria will actually start to eat up some of the macrophages and the damaged cells, and it'll produce more what's called T cells, which in the Western world, they'll call it anti-autoimmune cells, but it's just boosting your immune health. So some of the protocols that I work with is everything I work with is organic. Everything is always from super nutrient dense soil. And whoever invited you to this call is partnered with me in that and helping people and helping themselves regenerate their body with high caliber organic nutrition and gut repair herbs. And it's amazing and it works. And we would be happy to support you through your journey. And I'm going to look over into the chat here. And yeah, you had a super itchy ear for a few years and realized that it went away after starting superfoods. Yep. Yes. Okay. So that's the end of the call on yeast and candida. And if you are dealing with repeat overgrowth and all of these issues, and you've worked on, candida killing protocols, you have to get to the root cause. You have to heal the leaky gut. You have to strip the biofilms. You have to bring up the ATP and help repair the body. We do have an amazing 30-day protocol here that we support people with, and we have an online support app. We also do 2 calls a week like this in Zoom format to answer any of your questions as you're going through your health journey. So whoever reached out to you, get back in touch with them and they will get you on one of our Q&A calls to learn more. So thank you. I'm going to stop recording.